So, my sister and I have been talking about Elon Musk and how he lies all the time. He says falsehoods about immigration, about government spending, so on and so forth. Specifically, we were looking at this podcast. And she asked for a couple of links to back up what I was saying, or like some arguments to back up what I was saying. And instead of doing something more normal, I am going to record myself and talk about this here interview. So let's get into it.
Well, I mean, the government's one big pyramid scheme, if you ask me.
Yeah, well, you can tell me better than anybody.
Social Security is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time.
Right, explain that.
Oh, so well, people pay into Social Security, and the money goes out of Social Security immediately. But the obligation for Social Security is your entire retirement career. So you're paying with you're paying like if you look at the future obligations of Social Security, it far exceeds the tax revenue. Far. Have you ever looked at the debt clock?
Yes.
Okay. There's
So that's the first thing. Bringing in the debt clock at all is just a red herring. I don't know if that term is correct. It's false, but let's let him finish what he's saying.
there's our present day debt, but then there's our future obligations. So when you look at the future obligations of Social Security, the actual national debt is like double what people think it is.
Okay, so that is just simply false. Social Security cannot contribute to the debt. And I Googled two claims before this. I was originally going to send links, but this is the first claim that I Googled, and so I have this pulled up, but in the future I will just look it up. But Social Security cannot contribute to the national debt. Why? The way that it's set up, it cannot borrow from the government. It says this somewhere here. Aging population will cause entitlement spending to balloon. It's true that Medicare spending will soar if healthcare cost growth is not brought under control. The same is not true of Social Security spending, which is projected to level off as a share of GDP. It's running a surplus of $77 billion this year and amassing a trust fund large enough through the peak retirement of the baby boomers. Social Security can only spend what it receives in tax revenues and is accumulated in its trust fund from past surpluses and interest earnings. It cannot add to the deficit if the trust fund is exhausted because the law prohibits it from borrowing. Right, so this is the first just completely false thing. I'll try to remember to link all of these things in the description of this video. Not that like I know this source specifically, but this is something I know to be true, and I just Googled it, and this thing says what I know to be true. The way that Social Security is written, it cannot contribute to the debt. Think about it this way. It is a fund that people are paying into, and then this money is collected, and then other people take money out of it. That can't contribute to the debt unless you have like an additional fund borrowed from the government. That is not a possibility under Social Security. There is the Social Security Trust Fund that was set up because the people making this program understood that the baby boomer generation, there's like a population hump and that's moving towards the future, towards retirement. So they set up this trust fund to account for the fact that there was going to be a surplus of people needing retirement money, so they set up a trust fund to create a surplus of money to account for that. And whenever you hear people talking about Social Security, the system is going to blow up, it's going to explode and not work, that doesn't make any sense. That's not true. What is true is this trust fund, the extra money, right? Because the way it works is that people paid a little bit more in order into Social Security in order to account for this population hump that was moving forward. So people paid a little bit more into Social Security, and there was a trust fund that was accumulated, a certain amount of money that was set aside waiting for this population hump. And might be a small edit here while I catch my breath. And so the way it worked is people paid a little bit more into Social Security, and they accumulated the extra revenue into this trust fund, right? Whenever this trust fund goes to zero, whenever this trust fund runs out of money, there will still be people paying into Social Security, and thus money for people to take out for retirement. So whenever people say Social Security is going to blow up, what they mean is the trust fund is going to run out of money in whatever it is, 10, 15 years. I guess I'll look that up for fun. I don't know the exact time frame. When is the Social Security Trust Fund expected to be depleted? 2035. So in about 10 years. Social Security, the trust fund is about to go away. What that means is that your benefits will decrease. They will not go away. They will not expire. They will decrease. All right. And I think they decrease to about 80% of what they were prior to the trust fund existing, right? So there's like this excess money. Whenever it goes boom in 2035, people will still be receiving Social Security payments. They will just be receiving 80% of what they were beforehand. And you can think of it this way: people are still paying the Social Security money, so there will always be money generated for Social Security unless either it's legislated out of existence, hopefully not, Daddy Trump, hopefully, please don't do that, don't hurt grandma, or if the economy collapses. Right? Otherwise, there will always be people to pay into this fund, and there will always be people taking out, right? So yeah, it's just false that it will contribute to the national debt, and it's just a false narrative that you hear him basically hyping up here, that Social Security as a whole is like gonna blow up. Those are both just untrue things.
Because of the future obligations. So basically people are living way longer than expected. And there are fewer babies being born. So you have more people who are retired and get that live for a long time and get retirement payments. So the future obligations. So however bad the financial situation is right now with the federal government, it will be much worse in the future. At the risk of being a buzzkill here.
So we already talked about how this is just a false narrative. Another thing to realize is that the Social Security, like the amount that you pay into Social Security, is based on your income. I don't know the specific year that this was capped, but it was capped sometime in the past, and I think the cap is like something like $144,000 a year. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but that's roughly the amount of money that the maximum amount of money that you can make to increase the amount that you will pay into Social Security. And what I mean is, if you're making $200,000 a year or $300,000, you do not pay any more into Social Security than somebody making $144,000 a year. Right? The amount of workers has decreased. This is true. This is what he's talking about. The number of like able-bodied people in the workforce is lower than it was in the past. However, productivity has gone through the roof, right? Workers are way more efficient. They're generating more wealth for these companies. They're generating more wealth for themselves, assuming the companies actually pay them, and that gets into wealth inequality, but whatever, that's a separate topic. But yeah, the point is in the past it was said at 144, roughly, this is the number in my head, it could be off by 20,000 here or there, but like $144,000 a year. Any more you make, any amount of money you make above that does not go into Social Security at all. There's no amount that is taxed into Social Security. If you raise that cap, this trust fund, right, that is gonna go boom in 10 years, won't go boom. Right? If you raise the cap and make rich people pay their fair share, then the trust fund will also hold. And it won't just be me, but it will be my grandkids, not that I want kids, having Social Security at full benefits. Full benefits. But this is not something that the Republicans want to do, because that would require actually putting money in the pockets of working class people.
Did you see?
So we better fix what we've got right now, because if it's bad now, it's going to be much worse in the future.
There was an interview with this woman who was a whistleblower.
Yeah.
Did we ever find out if that was true?
There's so many whistles being blown. It's hard to keep track.
A lot of whistles. But this one lady.
It was only in one state. It was very specific instance.
Right, but it was using Social Security money, correct? That was her.
I don't know.
That was her allegation. So what she was alleging was that she was in charge of turning illegal immigrants into clients. That's what they would call them, and that she would go to them and try to ask them, "Do you have a headache? Do you have back problems?
Yes.
If you do, now you can be permanently disabled. You get permanent disability."
Did he say illegal immigrant? Let me go back to double check.
It was very specific instance.
Right, but it was using Social Security money, correct? That was her.
I don't know.
That was her allegation. So what she was alleging was that she was in charge of turning illegal immigrants into
Illegal
clients.
immigrants, that's his
what they would
claim.
call them, and that she would go to them and try to ask them, "Do you have a headache? Do you have back problems? If
Yes.
you do, now you can be permanently disabled. You get
Oh, yeah.
permanent disability, so you get Social Security for life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not just Social Security, but disability, which is even more.
Right.
All right, let's Google who can receive Social Security. Fuck the AI overview. Let's go to the Social Security Administration. Most jobs take Social Security taxes out of your paychecks. You can get a monthly benefit in your 60s. Eligibility. You're eligible if you're 62 years older. You're 62 or older. You've worked and paid Social Security taxes for 10 years or more. Interesting. So if somebody came here, right? If somebody came here illegally, then they would not have been paying in for 10 years. Now, illegal immigrants do pay taxes. In fact, their tax burden is much greater than the amount of money that they take out of the system, but that's a separate point. But yeah, so they have not been paying in for 10 years or more, so they cannot receive Social Security. We keep track of how many years you've paid Social Security taxes. Because of a current or former spouse's work, if you've worked and paid Social Security tax for 10 years or more, you get a monthly benefit. If you haven't worked and paid Social Security, we'll see if you're eligible for a monthly benefit based on current or former spouse's work. So if you have a spouse that is eligible, then you can get it. That seems fair. If you're an illegal immigrant, you come over here undocumented and you marry an American citizen, maybe you're eligible. Maybe. Okay, that seems reasonable. It's still an American family essentially getting Social Security. Vary better based on whether you're married, divorced, widowed. Once you apply and tell us about current past marriages, will ensure that you get the highest monthly benefit you're eligible for. You won't have to talk to an ex-spouse. All right, that's nice of them. Eligibility for your children. Your children may be eligible for a monthly benefit because of your work if they are under 18. Age 19 to 10 elementary or high school. Any age and have a disability. Gotcha. So it seems like perhaps there is a disability claim through Social Security for children. Now, I think that's potentially valid. So let's see. Because he also mentioned disability there. Who can receive disability benefits? Let's just Social Security Administration. Have worked in jobs covered by Social Security. Interesting. Have a medical condition that meets Social Security's strict definition of disability. So basically, in order to meet our definition of disability, you must have worked long enough and recently enough on Social Security to qualify for disability benefits. Social Security work credits are based on your total yearly wages or self-employment income. You can earn up to 4 credits each year. The amount needed for work credit changes from year to year. In 25, for example, you earn 1 credit for each $2,000 in wages or self-employment income. Disability depending on your age, when your disability begins. 40 credits, 20 of which were earned in the last 10 years. Okay, so it's basically people that work in the U.S., right? That's who can get Social Security benefits. It is people who have worked in the U.S. Now, illegal immigrants, undocumented people, working a job in the U.S., paying into our tax system, paying into the Social Security fund that comes out of their paycheck, that seems perfectly valid to me. Because remember, it doesn't matter if you're undocumented or not, you are paying into Social Security, right? Money is being taken out regardless. So if you spend 10 years, they're framing this as a whistleblower, is pointing out that people paying into the Social Security system are getting Social Security benefits. Now, I have no idea if it is true. Here, it didn't say anything about eligibility depending on... here, it didn't say anything in terms of eligibility based on your documented or undocumented status, right? Whether or not you're a citizen or permanent resident holder. But anybody who works, anybody who has a W-2 pays into Social Security. So any illegal immigrant, right, who is receiving Social Security benefits, according to these websites, at a minimum, had to have paid into the system. So that is no burden on the American people, which is the way they're framing it. It's a whistleblower, right, showing how the system is corrupted. That's how they're framing it. That's just simply false. Right. It may or may not be true that illegal immigrants receive Social Security. I do not know. It doesn't say anything about undocumented people being ineligible, so theoretically they have been, but they had to have worked. They have to have paid into the system, right? And that seems perfectly valid.
and you get them on the taxpayer dole right away and they're illegal aliens.
Again, taxpayer dole. Who are the taxpayers here? The people working,
Yes.
which includes undocumented people.
Oh, so if I were to say, like, what's at the heart of the sort of, like, why is the Democrat propaganda machine so fired up to destroy me? That's the
Because you're wrong about everything you say. I have to get a little jab in there every once in a while.
main reason.
I'm also not a Democrat.
The main reason is that entitlements fraud, that includes like Social Security, disability, Medicaid, entitlements fraud for illegal aliens is what is serving as a gigantic magnetic force to pull people in from all around the world and keep them here. Like basically, if you pay people at a standard of living that is above 90% of Earth, then you have a very powerful incentive for 90% of Earth to come here and to stay here. But if you end the illegal alien fraud, then you turn off that magnet, and they leave. And
So, Social Security fraud does happen. Most of the Social Security fraud, there's going to be a lot of news articles. So, most of the Social Security fraud, to my understanding, is like people that like, you know, if you make a lower income, you get more out of Social Security, right? It's people doing things like that, not reporting higher income, doing something like, if your spouse dies or something and you say they're still alive, something like that. I'll probably cut to see if I can find some information on the amount of Social Security fraud. So I remembered this video that I watched on Hank Green's channel, or sorry, on Vlogbrothers, that Hank Green did explaining Social Security fraud, and so I'm probably going to put a couple relevant clips here. I'll watch through the video on my own and put a couple of the clips explaining.
Good morning, John. The question before us is, are there millions of 150-year-olds receiving Social Security payments? And the answer is no. In fact, no one over the age of 115 is receiving Social Security payments because in 2015, the government updated its systems to ensure that anyone who turns 115 years old is declared dead and they stop receiving payments. Now,
so that's in response to a specific claim that like Trump and Elon have been making. They found a database with people aged 200 on Social Security. But as you can see, whether or not they're in the database does not mean that they are receiving payments. And so, and this is one of the ways that I was trying to articulate that Social Security fraud happens.
The way this might show up is if records are currently not kept well, people might die, and then their relatives might simply never report their death to the government, and they would keep collecting those retirement benefits for like a decade or two. That kind of
So that's one kind of fraud that does happen. But the majority of Social Security fraud comes from...
The majority of Social Security fraud is overpayment. It is living people who are supposed to be getting Social Security benefits who are getting more than they legally should get. Social Security is means tested, which basically means you get more money if you have less money. If you like go back to work, your Social Security benefits might go down, and you might not want to report to the government that that happened so that your benefits don't go down. In the same way,
makes sense that people would do that. Obviously, it's illegal. Obviously, it costs other people in the Social Security system some of their benefits, right? It makes the system more bloated. But this is different from that. That's the majority of Social Security fraud, by the way. It's not like there is this gigantic burden from illegal aliens attracting. From illegal aliens, like stealing illegal aliens, stealing Social Security, like a big magnet from every country that's nearby. And here's a really good point that is made about the conservative way of talking about Social Security. Conservatives always argue for a smaller government, for less regulation, etc., etc. Here's a very good point made by Hank Green.
Whether it's somebody saying that they are older than they are, a person collecting benefits from a dead person, or somebody just not telling the government the full story about their whole financial situation so that they can collect more benefits. The solution to those problems are mostly a more robust administrative state and more bureaucratic hoops for everybody to jump through, requiring people to tell the government when somebody's born, when somebody dies, when somebody changes their housing or employment situation. And then in order to get people to do that stuff, you actually have to have penalties for not doing it. And you have to enforce those penalties on everyone, not just people who are going to do fraud fraud, but everyone, so that you can know when people end up doing fraud. So you have to
Yes, that's a very good point. One way, another version of this that is important to look at is like tax fraud, right? People hate the IRS for good reason. Me too. It's not fun to pay your taxes, right? But if you look at the effect of actually deregulating the IRS, making the IRS have less money, less resources to go after tax fraud, what are the results of that? Let me ask you a question. You, my sister, who this video is directed to, if the IRS sent you a letter that you owe $1,000 in back taxes, and they said you have to pay or you're going to jail, what are you gonna do? In my mind, you were going to go, I don't know how much money you have in the bank, but you're going to go, oh man, $1,000, that's a lot of money. I don't know if I can afford that, or maybe you can, but you're like, I don't want to pay this. This sucks. I'm pretty sure I've paid my taxes, but oh well, I pay them. Because at the end of the day, you don't have the resources to fight that claim. Now, let me ask you this. If Elon Musk gets a letter from the IRS saying, you owe us $10 million in back taxes, pay or you're going to, be fined, go to jail, whatever. What is his response? My intuition says he is going to call his lawyer. In fact, call his team of lawyers who are then going to go through his taxes, fight every single little instance where it could be argued one way or the other that he actually owes this money, and there's going to be an extensive legal battle over him paying these taxes or not. And it's not specific to Elon Musk, it is any rich person, right? So the effect of defunding the IRS means that you do not have the resources to go after wealthy people, right? Because you need extra resources, extra money, extra lawyers, extra accountants, extra people checking, etc., to go after the people who are able to hide their money, right? Go through loopholes, have legal teams that will defend them for years, if only to make it more expensive. Even if they know that they've committed tax fraud, maybe just making it expensive for the government is a good deterrent, right? If you have enough money, that absolutely makes sense as a strategy to keep your money. And this is a little bit separate from the argument of that was talked about in this Joe Rogan interview, where it is a magnet pulling illegal immigrants into the U.S. But like just looking at the conservative framework, defunding these things does not eliminate fraud, right? You need to have a more robust administrative state to deal with fraud and to deal with people fighting against these things.
They stop coming, and the ones that are here, many of them will simply leave. And if that happens, they will lose a massive number of Democratic voters.
And if it did,
okay. So that he has made a second claim there. The first claim is that it is a magnet pulling people into the U.S. And the second claim is that they are losing Democratic voters whenever this magnet is taken away. Let's just look at immigration over time in the US, and then let's also Google when was Social Security started. So this was started on August 14th, 1935, right? So this is apparently the magnet. This is when the magnet was established, right? 1935. So if this is a big magnet stealing illegals from across the nation to come take our wealth away from us, right? We would expect a massive spike in immigration following 1935, and we would expect it to just increase over and over and over and over, basically. Now, one thing before we look at this data, it's certainly true that immigration will increase for many reasons. Among them, 1935, I can think of a couple different tragedies between 1935 and now that would make people immigrate to anywhere, any wealthy country, anywhere they can find a job, right? War would be one of them. The 2008 financial crisis. I could think of other examples. Another thing to point out is that the population of the world has increased dramatically since then. So the amount of immigration, like it would take a lot of analysis to really find out how much immigration has increased due to Social Security. But also, before we even look at this data, also, the whole narrative that we pointed out before, that illegal immigrants are stealing our Social Security, right? This is not true. They may or may not be eligible for benefits, as we talked about before, but they had to have worked. They had to have paid into it to receive benefits. We just looked at the websites from the US government that say how you're eligible. Well, you have to be eligible by working within the last 10 years, by paying into Social Security. So to say that they are stealing Social Security benefits is flat out wrong. If they were never there, they would have never paid into it, right? But let's look at this Pew data. So this is immigration share of the US population is a roughly fair way to look at it. And if you look in 1890, so in fact 1935 is when it was established. There's a dip for like 40 years of Social Security, right? It was established in 1935. Now, the immigration policies were almost certainly different then, but you can see as a share of the U.S. population, it was peaking around here, and in 2023, so we're getting back to that peak. Back to a peak, at the turn of the 19th century is roughly where we are today. Right? And also where immigrants are coming from, this is another separate point, but where immigrants are coming from is a very important thing to look at when you look at like US foreign policy, right? Like, why are so many immigrants coming from Latin America? Did the US happen to destabilize some of those regions? Did we install our own dictators? Did we do some CIA bullshit to other regions, to other nations? Did we violate their sovereignty? Did we undermine their economy? Did we put sanctions on them? These are all questions you need to be asking about the places nearby us from which these people are coming. And I think you can look at places like Venezuela, and boom, suddenly there's so many more people coming. Why? Because there's economic sanctions. Oh, I'm not showing my screen. All right, anyway, cut to this part. We can ignore... Ah, man, I don't know exactly what I didn't show. I wonder how much I was not showing. Damn. Basically, we were talking about Venezuelan immigration, because here, about half the immigrants from 1965 to 2023 are from Latin America. I'm not exactly sure... Ooh, how do I reopen that? Yeah, so about half of all immigrants from 1965 to 2003 to 2023 are from Latin America. I'm not exactly sure what Latin America is. I think Venezuela is in Latin America, but that's what got me on this rabbit hole. I was talking about economic sanctions, right? And so, yeah, the sanctions came in response to repression during this, and so after 2014, boom, the Venezuelan migration from Venezuela skyrockets. Due to U.S. foreign policy, right? We put economic sanctions on this region. This region is now economically poor. The people in that country want to eat and live life, right? Frickin' want to live life and eat food, and they want to have a job that pays them money so they can do those things. So they try to go somewhere else. And so, boom, there's a big explosion in the Venezuelan immigration, right? But yeah, so the other claim that was just made, let's just back up a second and listen to it again.
Legal alien fraud. Then you turn off that magnet, and they leave. And they stop coming, and the ones that are here, many of them will simply leave. And if that happens, they will lose a massive number of Democratic voters.
You have to be a legal U.S. citizen to vote in federal or state elections. You just do. This is a thing that, this is the one thing that just drives me so mad about the about the election year and how false this claim is, and yet how much it's repeated by people on the right. Who can vote in U.S. elections? USA.gov, a government website. Who can vote and cannot vote? You can vote in U.S. Federal, state, and local elections if you are a U.S. citizen. Some areas allow non-citizens to vote in local elections only. Local elections only. Including U.S. citizens living outside, born abroad, dual citizens. So you have to meet your state's residency requirements. You have to be 18 years or older, and you have to be registered to vote. Who cannot vote? Non-citizens, including permanent legal residents. This is a government website, by the way. Permanent legal residents, if you're unaware, are green card holders, right? They cannot vote in federal, state, and most local elections. So there are some cities in the world, right? There are a few cities in the world, maybe somewhere in California, probably, maybe New York, right? A couple of blue states, most likely, that have laws where people who live there, which I think, this is about democracy, right? People who live there can vote in those elections. I think that's perfectly valid, but whether or not you think it's valid for undocumented people to vote in local elections, they cannot vote in state or federal elections. They can only vote on a city basis, right? They are not democratic voters in the sense that he is talking about. He's saying that there's this magnet that is pulling people from everywhere to thief our money, and then they will vote for the party that is giving them the money, right? This is a false narrative. Because one, they cannot vote for the people who are actually changing the laws, the people in Congress and the Senate, the presidential election. They cannot vote in those elections. And moreover, as we discussed before, they cannot take out of Social Security unless they have worked, which means they have paid into Social Security. All right, let's keep going.
And if it didn't happen, they would turn those people into voters.
Correct.
Which they were trying to do.
They're already turning them. So in New York State, illegal aliens can already vote in state and city elections.
Okay, that's a specific claim. New York State non-citizens who can vote in New York State. New York State Board of Elections. To qualify for a voter registration in New York State, you must be a United States citizen. All right, I'll keep reading just in case. Be 18 years old, be a resident of this state and county, city, or village at least 30 days, not be in prison or a felony, not be adjudicated mentally, not claim the right to vote elsewhere if you're unsure. Huh. That's weird. Doesn't say anything else about non-citizens voting. Weird. New York City. Let's because this is New York State. New York. Who can vote in New York City? NYC Board of Elections. You must be a citizen of the United States, includes those persons born in Puerto Rico, Guam, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Okay, so I don't want to get into whether or not these places should be states, but they have to abide by U.S. law and they whatever else. But, I guess those people are not technically U.S. citizens. I don't know. How exactly does person who's at least 16 years of age... Oh, that's cool. I like that law a lot. They can pre-register at 16 or automatically register at 18. I mean, the government should just automatically be registering anybody anyway. Citizens shouldn't have to register themselves. That's just a way to suppress votes, but whatever. Separate issue. Are people in Puerto Rico allowed to legally, move to the U.S.? How does that work? Let's learn together. Can people from Puerto Rico... move to the U.S. Yes, people born in Puerto Rico as U.S. citizens can move and live freely in the United States, as it is considered internal migration, not immigration. That makes sense because they are a U.S. territory. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if undocumented people can vote in some New York City, in some blue cities, including like New York City. Doesn't look like they can, though, at least according to the Board of Elections in the city of New York. You have to be a citizen of the United States. It's just a false claim. Let's keep going.
A lot of people don't know that. I mean, they're trying to fight that, and they're trying to stop that, but they're currently, I think it's like 600,000 are registered to vote legally.
I mean, I could Google that number in response to this and probably get some right-wing articles, but we just read from the website that they cannot vote. So 600,000, I don't know where it came from. I don't know what it means. I could find out where that misinformation is coming from. I'll just skip it.
Yes, in New York.
That is wild.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at, say, FEMA, like the agency that was paying for illegal aliens to stay at luxury hotels in New York was FEMA.
Okay, that's another claim. FEMA pays for... How do I even look that up? That's such a weird claim. I've heard this before. I know it's false. FEMA pays for... Did he say illegal immigrants? Let's see.
They're currently, I think it's like 600,000 are registered. If you look at, say, FEMA, like the agency that was paying for illegal aliens to stay.
Illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, whatever. You can use his very dehumanizing language if he chooses to. FEMA pays for undocumented immigrants to stay in... God, I can't type. In luxury hotels. I mean, I assume that I am indeed making this video for my sister. I'm assuming that like factcheck.org is probably not something that she would believe very readily, and that's fine. I'm not criticizing that anyway. I'm just trying to find a different source. Cloud Entry's bill to terminate FEMA programs finding luxury hotel services for illegal immigrants. So this is under the Trump administration. So I'm not trusting that. You can shelter and services program, FEMA. Okay, this seems reasonable. The shelter and services program from the FEMA website, as directed by Congress in the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023, is administered by FEMA in partnership with U.S. Customs and Border Protection. In fiscal year 2024, Congress appropriated $650 million for SSP, Shelter and Services Program. SSP provides financial support to non-federal entities to provide sheltering and related activities to non-citizen migrants following their release from the Department of Homeland Security. The intent is to support CBP, Customs and Border Protection, in the safe, orderly, and humane release of non-citizen migrants from short-term holding facilities. As you can see, like, the narrative here is just completely different, like funding illegal immigrants to live in luxury hotels, right? This is instead them being released from the Department of Homeland Security, and it is making sure that you are not just, like, releasing them into the streets, and it's making sure that they have a place to stay. They are immigrants, after all. They probably don't have a permanent residence yet. That's what we're talking about here. Department of Homeland Security has probably apprehended people who have not yet found a permanent resident in the United States, and they are giving them short-term housing. It doesn't say short-term housing. That's what I was looking for, is how long are they funding them for. But, like, I don't know. Framing it as like luxury hotels is crazy by itself. Where's AP? I personally like Associated Press. I don't know if you do, my sister. I won't name you in case you don't want to be. FEMA's role in dispensing and how they're being used. Look at the facts. To buy luxury hotels, this is the claim, to buy luxury hotels to house illegal migrants, does not send money directly to New York hotels. It does administer money on behalf of U.S. Customs and Border Protection authorized by Congress in 2023 for the Shelter and Services Program. It was created to support local governments, provide support for not. That's what we just read from the where'd that website go? Oh, I think I backed up. Yes, from FEMA.gov. Let's go ahead and open that so I can put the link in the description. Money is separate from disaster relief funds, so it's not taking from disaster relief funds, which was also claimed by other people, but whatever. So that is, a reframing. 2 payments from the federal government, migrant assistance. 1 payment was for, and the other for blah, under 2 tranches. City spokesperson. The money covered reimbursements for services delivered between November 23rd and included reimbursement for hotels, security, food, and other costs. About 19 million reimbursement claims were for hotel costs, she said. Okay, so it's some fraction. Has never paid for luxury rates for hotels, Garcia said the city. That's backed up by a report last year from city comptroller Brad Lander, who is now running for mayor in a bid to unseat Adams. Reasonable government paid on average $152 a night for rooms. That seems like a normal hotel cost. In fact, in New York City, that's probably on the cheaper side. The vast majority outside of Manhattan, so that's also going to lower the cost. Some of the Manhattan rooms are around $200 per night. There you go. As I was saying, it's like $150 is cheaper, but that's not a luxury rate. Rates for 5-star hotel, $400. Yeah, so it's like they did purchase hotels to make people not have to sleep on the street. It's a very different thing. They're not luxury hotels, and it's not like I don't know. The way it's framed, it sounds like a permanent residence. They get to stay in these hotels forever. Obviously, he didn't say those words exactly, but it's like the idea that he's presenting you with is that they're like stealing this money. Shelter and services program also by FEMA. Support sheltering activities. I'm trying to find like how long they're allowed to stay there. Migrants, blah 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 blah. The freeze just delays into the new administration through states. Communities and organizations that rely on federal funding to mass confusion was rescinded. All right, so again, the framing is wrong. So it is true, as it is. Like in many instances, there's a kernel of truth. Like it does seem from the research we did in this video that illegal immigrants can take out of Social Security, right? But who can take out of Social Security are people who have paid money into it, right? So they're not like stealing. It's not this big magnet. It's people that come here to work, and if you work here, then you receive the benefits of people who work, right? That makes sense. People who work in the U.S. pay into Social Security and later can take out of it. Here, they're paying for, FEMA is paying for luxury hotels. I guess, let's see if he says more about this claim.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at, say, FEMA, like the agency that was paying for illegal aliens to stay at luxury hotels in New York was FEMA. That's an agency that's meant to support Americans in distress from natural disasters, was paying for luxury hotels for illegals in New York.
It's true. Yeah.
That's a fact. They're literally, like, when we stopped that payment, we stopped all those money, because that's obviously an insane way to spend taxpayer money. The New York sued the federal government to get the money.
Okay. So, yeah, again, a kernel of truth. It is true that there were government funds to pay for undocumented migrants to stay in hotels in New York. They were not luxury, and the framing as it is taking away from disaster relief is false. It was a separate fund, as we read. And so, like, taking these kernels of truth, right? The idea that, like, people get paid by the government, and the idea that, like, I don't know, we did spend money on this, which, like, you can disagree with that or agree with that. I personally think treating people humanely is a good thing. And having, like, I don't know, like, when you look at, like, the history of Americana, right, and there's, like, people coming to Ellis Island to like, make their better life, and to, like, they get dropped into New York City, and they're, like, looking around at this new, big, beautiful world, and they're trying to make something out of it and make something of themselves. And it's like, isn't it nice to treat those people well? Like, they're in New York, right? It's pretty hard to get to New York, right? It's not like it's just like Mexican drug dealers smuggling fentanyl across the border, or at least if it is, they had to travel a long way, and at least they work hard. Which, by the way, this is not a claim that was made in this video, but the majority of the fentanyl smuggled across the border is by legal U.S. citizens, which, if you think about it, makes sense. I could look up that claim, but I'm just too tired at this point, too. I think I'm roughly done with fact-checking a few things. But, like, it makes sense when you think about it, because you want easy access to the United States if you're going to bring things into the U.S., and so the legal ports of entry, the typical ports of entry, and a U.S. citizen, that's like the easiest way to get in. And so the most of the fentanyl that comes in is like in, you know, different like setups where they like hollow out the insides of a car, like the seats and the undercarriage or whatever, and the trunk will all be like hollowed out, and they stuff fentanyl in there, and it's just a dude that lives in the U.S. like, hey, I'm coming back for my vacation. That's how most of the fentanyl gets here. I think it's like 80% of it. So framing illegal immigrants as, you know, drug smugglers is a mischaracterization. But anyway, kernels of truth that are just simply distorted. That is the story of immigration and the right. Like, is it true that some illegal immigrants have made murders happen in the U.S. on U.S. soil? Yeah, of course. If you get 1,000 people from anywhere in the world and you wait 10 years, I don't know if it's this often, 10,000 people, a couple of them are going to make a murder happen, right? But are they, by and large, murderers and rapists and criminals? The answer is no. Right? Are they stealing money from the U.S. government? The answer is no. Are they staying in luxury hotels, taking disaster relief money away from U.S. citizens? The answer is no. Were they staying in hotels? Yes. Can they take from Social Security? Yes, if they've paid into it. Are there some who murder and do other crimes? Yes, of course, right? But as a rule, if a person on the right says something about immigration, I fact check it. And that's just the way that I've lived my life. I think there's more to be said, more to learn, and there's a lot more that I could have done here. But at the end of the day, this was something. Remember, you are capable and worthy of love. Share that with those around you. And good luck out there.